Hi guys, I'm Alex from Mason Lifestyle. I hope you guys are doing well. As promised, today we're going to be working on a sew along for Butterick 6872. I'm actually wearing my dress and I also made a lot of adjustments to this dress, and I deviate a little bit from the instructions in the pattern, but just for a few things, not all. But I put those in my video. But without further ado, let's get started. Hi guys, so today we're going to be working on Butterick 6872. Let me tell you about the pieces that you are going to need. You're going to need pattern piece number 1, and this is the bodice front, and you're going to cut 1. You're also going to need pattern piece number 2, and this is the front facing, and you're going to cut 1 of fabric and 1 of interfacing. You're also going to need pattern piece number 3. This is the bodice back, and you are going to cut 2. You're also going to need the back facing, and this is piece number 4. You're going to cut 2 of fabric and 2 of interfacing. You're also going to need the sleeve, and this is pattern piece number 13, and you're going to cut 2. You're also going to need bodice side front, and this is piece number 7, and you're going to cut 2. You're also going to need the bodice side back. This is piece number 8, and you're going to cut 2. You're going to need the skirt front, and you're going to cut 1 on the fold. You're also going to need the skirt back, and you're going to cut 2. This is not cut on the fold. Again, not cut on the fold. And last but not least, you are going to need piece number 11, and this is the lower ruffle, and you're going to cut 3 on the fold. So go ahead and cut your fabric, mark your notches, and interface the front and back facing. All right guys, so we are working on Butterick 6872, and I'm actually doing view C. And if you are joining me for the first time, I created a video about what adjustments I made to the pattern, and I'm going to go ahead and link it above. But please make sure that you look at that video. It's a quick 10-minute video, just so you are not lost when I have made some changes to this pattern. So let's start. So this is pattern piece number 1. And this is the bodice front, and if you look at the pattern, it has a stitching line and a tuck, also known as the fold line. So I went ahead and did some lines with my chalk, and then I also went ahead and pressed it. Those again are on that fold line. So if you see it right next to each other, it's the fold line, and then you're going to stitch. And this is the right hand side. So I'm going ahead and fold, and I'm going to stitch right on that line, right all the way down. So go ahead and mark your bodice front. And the best way that I did that, I just went ahead and pressed it. So go ahead and press it, and then go ahead and stitch. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so I'm stitching pretty much on that stitching line. So don't forget the back stitch at the start and at the end. And I'm trying to keep my pattern piece right, just right where I have that fold line. To go ahead and back stitch. And in the front, it will look like this. See how you have these? Once we're done making these, I want you to press these down. And again, this is the front of that pattern piece number 1. So go ahead and do the rest of your fold and stitching lines pattern piece number 1. That's the bodice front. Next, I went ahead and pressed my tucks. So I want you to go ahead and baste these down. And I usually just want to do that within the seam allowance, just so they don't move on me and shift around. So I'm gonna do that for both sides. And next, the pattern's asking us to stay stitch on the sides. All right, so I went ahead and pressed my tucks. I basted those in, and then I went ahead and also stay stitched the sides of the front bodice, because we are going to be working on this area, and the pattern right where those notches are at a slight angle. So you want to make sure that that pattern piece does not stretch on you. So now go ahead and put this off to the side. So now you have pattern piece number 7, which is your bodice side front, and piece number 8, which is your side back. And you have 2 pieces for each of those, and I want you to find your notches. Find your notches, and I want you to pin. And you have 1 notch on each side. And I want you to go ahead and do that for both pattern pieces number 7 and 8. And I want you to stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance. Don't forget the back stitch at the start and at the end. Once you do that, I want you to press your seams open. And if you have a serger or an overlocker, that you go ahead and you finish your seams. So go ahead and do that now for pieces number 7 and 8. All right, guys, so we have pieces number 7 and 8, and now I want you to grab piece number 3, which is your bodice back, and I want you with right sides together. And usually I put a little piece of washi tape so I know where am I at. So you have a notch on both sides. Pin right there. You have a dot on your pattern piece, and you also have a dot. So make sure that those 2 line up and pin. So attach the back, and now I also want you to attach with right sides together. I want you to attach the bodice front, the one that we just worked on. And you have a notch right there. You have a notch in your front pattern piece. So pin. Make sure you have raw edge with raw edge. And you also have a dot right there. Pin. You also have another notch right here. And I'm using a Rayon Challis. It's very lightweight, which will be perfect for summer. So go ahead and stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance. Don't forget the back stitch at the start and at the end. So go ahead and attach the bodice back to the side bodice back piece. That is piece number 8. So piece number 8 to piece number 3 and piece number 7 to piece number 1. Go ahead and do that now. And you have a dot. This is piece number 7 and 8. You have a dot right at the top of that pattern piece, and that's where I want you to start. Don't want you start all the way at the top. I want you to start right on that dot. So don't forget the back stitch at the start and at the end. And now we have this other piece that is attaching to the bodice front. So again, I want you to start at that dot at 5/8. So we went ahead and attached our pieces number 7 and 8 to piece number 3, which is the bodice back. And then we also attached it to the bodice front. This is piece number 1. And we did that for the right hand side. Now we have to do the same for the left hand side. So go ahead and do that now. Once you're done, I want you to go ahead and press your seams and finish your seams. Go ahead and do that now. So I got my bodice done, right? Front and back. Here is how the inside look. I went ahead and finished my seam and pressed my seams open. So I'm gonna go ahead and put that off to the side. And I am going to grab my sleeves. And that is piece 13. And the pattern's asking you to stay stitch. You have a dot at each corner of your pattern piece right here. So I want you to go ahead and stay stitch, and then I want you to cut towards that. And if you measure with your sewing gauge, it's gonna be at 5/8. So once you do that, I want you to turn this, and it's asking you also to turn 1/4 of an inch. So essentially make a narrow, I would say we're going to make a casing to make sure that we can put our elastic at the top. So go ahead and do that now. So go ahead and stay stitch and cut towards that dot. Go ahead and do that now. So now that you edge stitch and cut on those corners, I want you to go ahead and turn this top part of your sleeve, and I want you to do it at 5/8. Once you do that, I want you to also turn it of 1/4 of an inch. I finished my sleeve. You don't have to. It's just, I just want to make sure that there is nothing fraying inside. So go ahead and do that now for both of your sleeves. And again, this is my right side that's going to look on the sleeve, right, with the washi tape, and this is the inside of the sleeve. So go ahead and do that now for both sleeves. So now that we went ahead and did our casing at the top of our sleeve, this is the inside, the wrong side, right? So now that we have that casing done, I want you to grab your sleeves and with right sides together, I want you to pin, and you have a notch there right in the center. And that you stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance. Don't forget the back stitch at the start and at the end. Once you do that, I want you to press your seams, and I want you to finish your seams. And then we are going to do the same thing that we did for the casing at the top of the sleeve. So you see the casing at the top of the sleeve, that's the inside, right? I want you to do the same thing. So turn it 5/8 and then turn that little edge 1/4 inch. And again, stitch on the edge. Go ahead and do that for both sleeves. Again, attach the side of your sleeve. Once you do that, press it open, finish those edges, and go ahead. You are going to make another casing for your elastic. Make sure that you leave a gap, right? Make sure you leave a gap of about 1 inch, 2 inches, so you can loop through your elastic. Go ahead and do that now. So I went ahead and pressed in my casing 5/8 and then turned it in 1/4 inch. And I am going to start right at the underarm, and I'm going to edge stitch. So remember, don't forget the back stitch at the start and at the end, and we are going to leave a gap towards the end of at least 2 inches so we can pull our elastic through. So again, I edge stitch and then I left a gap so I can go ahead and loop my elastic through. So go ahead and do that for both of your sleeves. All right, so now that I have both of my sleeves ready to go and I did the casing at the bottom and also the casing at the top, I want you to grab a bodkin or perhaps a safety pin. If you don't have one of these, nice little tool to invest in. So you're going to grab your elastic, and the pattern gives you pattern piece number 6. It is an elastic guide. How do I know that this is the right length? I did a muslin. So go ahead and just loop it through that casing that you created. And you can always leave it a lot longer and just cut it when you get to the end. But I pretty much pulled this one out of my muslin. So I'm going to pin it right here. Actually, pin it on the side and then just keep pulling the bodkin through. Okay. Make sure it's not twisted. Okay. Once you get to the end, you can always pin it. And of course, adjust the gathers. So once you put your elastic in, I want you to pull this off. I want you to go ahead and just go to your sewing machine and just put a couple of stitches at each hand, just because you want to make sure that you lock in your elastic. So go ahead and do that for both of your sleeves. Go ahead and do that now. And again, I'm doing a couple of stitches just to hold my elastic in the elastic casing so it doesn't come out. And just a couple of back and forth stitches. So my elastic is, right, it's in there. It's not going anywhere. So go ahead and do that for both sleeves at the start and at the end. All right, so I got this done. And guys, the pattern also tells you to go ahead and do the casing at the bottom at this time and adjust it, but your bodice and your sleeves are already into, they're still not together. So I rather to do this later on once I have my bodice together and I have my skirt, and I can always adjust how much the gathers on this is gonna go. So I'm gonna leave that for later. But once I have my sleeve, I'm going to grab my bodice, right? And again, you have notches, 2 for the back, 1 for the front, and same on your bodice, you have 2 for the back, 1 on the front. So with right sides together, go ahead and mark that middle seam on the arm, pin, and then go ahead and match your notches, right? I'm going to do this side first because my notches are right there. Again, you have that dot right here. Right? Make sure you also pin on this side. And just essentially, this is all about pinning your sleeves in. Dot at the top, pin. Once you do this, right, you attach the bottom of your sleeve. I want you to go ahead and stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance. Don't forget the back stitch at the start and at the end. And the pattern asks you to do this twice, and you do it twice to reinforce the bottom of your sleeve. Once I do that, I'm also going to go ahead and finish my raw edge in my overlocker or my serger. But I want you to do this for both sleeves. So go ahead and attach your sleeves to the bodice. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so remember when we had those dots at the top of our sleeve? That's where you're going to start. So start and back stitch. And you have another dot where we, on the sleeve, and that's where you're going to end. So once you get there, don't forget the back stitch. Now that we went ahead and attached our sleeves, I want you to try on your bodice. Yes, that's that time that I usually say, stop right now and try on things. And guys, the reason why I want you to stop at those dots that you have in your sleeve, right? You have those dots at the edge of your sleeve on both sides. And that is because you still have to attach a facing. And the facing is going to be attached at the top, at the front, and also in the back. So keep that in mind. You have to attach that, okay? So once you do that, try on your bodice. Make sure you're happy with it. If you want to go ahead and attach the casing at that time, you can also do that. I'm going to wait until I attach the skirt, but go ahead and try on your bodice. Make sure you're happy with the fit and do that now. All right, now that you tried on your bodice, you made any changes that needed to be made, I want you to put that off to the side. And I want you to grab piece number 9, and this is your skirt front. And I want you to go ahead and open it. It's cut on the fold. I want you to go ahead and do 2 rows of gathering stitches. So go ahead and do that now for piece number 9. That's your skirt front. And I want you to also do that for the 2 pieces for the skirt back, and these are piece number 10. So go ahead and do that 2 rows of gathering stitches on the longest stitch on your machine. And I want you to leave your threads long because you are going to gather all of that. So make sure you do that now. And again, do not backstitch or lock in your stitches. You want to leave your threads long so you can pull on that. So again, 2 rows of gathering stitches on the longest setting on your sewing machine for both pieces of the skirt back and your 1 piece for the skirt front. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so I'm going to do 2 rows of gathering stitch, one at 3/8 and another one at 4/8. Again, I have my machine set at 5, which is my longest running stitch, and I have my threads long. Again, 2 rows of gathering stitches on the longest stitch on your sewing machine. Do that for pieces 9 and 10, and I believe you have 2 pieces for pattern piece number 10. That's the skirt back. Go ahead and do that now. So we went ahead and did our 2 rows of gathers in both the skirt front and the skirt back. So now I want you to stitch those together, and you have 1 notches here on the side. So of course, pin. So again, you're pinning the back pieces to the front piece. So again, you have your skirt front and your 2 side pieces. I want you to stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance. Don't forget the back stitch at the start and at the end. Once you do that, I want you to finish that raw edge. Go ahead and do that now. So I went ahead and attached my skirt front to my skirt back. So now I want you to grab your bodice, right? And I want you to match these side seams, right? I want you to match those side seams there. And if you see this, that's the back of my bodice. This is my back piece for my skirt. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull on those gathers. And I'm going to go ahead and just distribute the gathers. And you really want to pull on the gathers and make sure that they're all even once this piece gets to the back of the bodice piece. So again, you just want to even out the skirt with the back. You really want to make sure that your gathers are evenly distributed, that you don't have a lot of gathers in one bunch and the other one is pretty much straight. So this will take a little bit of time, but go ahead and do that. And I want you to do this for the entire length of your so now that I attached my bodice to my skirt, I want you to stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance. Don't forget the back stitch at the start all the way to the end. And once you do that, I want you to press your seam to the top towards the bodice and also trim your seams. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so I want to make sure that once you attach your bodice to your skirt, how do you know you did a good job? Your gathers are even and also your side seams match, right? Again, your side seams match. And give this a good press. And again, I want you to trim your seam allowance. I want to finish it in your serger or your overlocker. I still have to do that, right? And if you have any basting stitches that you can still see, just like I do there, that you pull those out. So go ahead and do that now. Once you do that, I want you to also go ahead and finish the raw edge on the back of your dress because we are going to be attaching the zipper. So we want to make sure that this edge is finished. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so we went ahead and just pressed our seam inside and I finished it. Let me show you how it looks inside, right? I pressed it, I finished. So now I want you to go ahead and again, with right sides together. Looking for, and I want you to match again your seams. Super important, matching those seams makes a huge difference, right? And you also have 3 notches in the back. So, and if you look at your skirt back piece, you have these dots towards the center back. You have these dots. So that's where you're going to start stitching all the way down. So again, right? Here's my pattern piece, right? Right there. So you are going to stitch from that dot, back stitch all the way down, and the top piece, I want you to baste, okay? And why do I want you to baste? Because we are going to be attaching our zipper. So I want you to baste this in. Baste meaning your longest running stitch, because once we are done attaching the zipper, we are going to take out those stitches. So again, from this dot at the bottom of your skirt, let me show you how this looks, right? Here's your dress. Here's the bottom of your dress. And we are going to be installing a zipper from the top piece. But this bottom piece, we need to stitch it in. So I want you to start at that dot, lock in your stitches, and keep going all the way down and lock in your stitches. And then from that dot all the way to the top, I want you to baste. Once you do that, I want you to press your seams open. So go ahead and do that now. All right, guys, so I went ahead and stitched my middle seam. And now you have your invisible zipper, and you really want to make sure that your invisible zipper is facing down. And also you want to make sure that the middle of the zipper is aligned with the middle of your seam, right? And first and foremost, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to baste this on my machine on one side, but I just definitely want to make sure that it's aligned. And I'm only catching the seam allowance. I'm not catching the entire zipper. Or I'm not catching the entire bodice, just the seam allowance. You're just working with the seam allowance. So I went ahead and did my right side because I want to open this, and I also kept my pull all the way at the top. I'm going to cut that later. So go ahead and baste your right side of your invisible zipper now. So again, I'm basting my invisible zipper in, and my zipper is facing down. So essentially the side that is going to be outside, seen on my dress, is facing down. I'm basting it in. I'm basting it in because then I'm going to go with it with my invisible zipper foot or my zipper foot. So I'm essentially just basting it in. And I'm just doing this on the seam allowance, not on the entire dress. Seam allowance. Again, I'm just trying to baste it in, guys. You can use your zipper foot if you want for this, but I'm just trying to baste it in. And again, now I'm doing the other side. Same thing, and I'm basting this in. So I have the longest stitch on my machine, basting it in. Now I want you to take out those basting stitches that we did. Remember, we basted the top where the zipper is going to go, and then the bottom where the zipper is not at, we pretty much locked in those stitches. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so I got my zipper pasted, and I want to make sure that I get as close as possible to those coils, and I'm not quite there. Now, I feel like I'm a little closer. And you really want to get close as possible with your zipper foot to these coils. Okay, so we're going to start. Don't forget the back stitch. And again, make sure you are only doing this on the seam allowance. And see how I pulled my zipper, my pretty much my pull out of the way. So now I have to get my pull back through that little gap. Hold on. This is kind of like the tricky part, because you want to get your zipper back through that little hole. And guys, so we went ahead and did our zipper, and I have to give this a really good press. But what you really want to make sure is that your two seams down here, that they match, okay? If it doesn't match, you have to go at it again, because you don't want this to be higher and the left side to be lower. You want them to match. That's why I have you doing the zipper, this way. Now, once you get your zipper done, right? So again, give it a good press. That's pretty nice, right? So now I want you to put this off to the side, and I want you to grab your lower ruffle. All right, so now that you got your zipper done, I want you to grab your piece number 11. And remember how I told you at the start of the video that the pattern is asking you to cut 3 unfold, because you are going to attach that in thirds around your dress. Well, I actually cut only 2 unfold, but I extended my pieces a lot more. I used the entire width of my 60-inch challis fabric. So, and I'm doing that because I want to make sure that my seams are matching the seams of my dress and that they're not in thirds. So I want you to grab each piece, and I want you to stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance. I want you to stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance, and I want you to finish the raw edge, and I want you to so I want you to stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance. Don't forget the back stitch at the start and at the end. That's for one side. And make sure that again you have right sides together and that they're not twisted. And then again you do that on the other side. So again, stitch that lower ruffle together, 5/8 of an inch. Don't forget the back stitch at the start, at the end on the left hand side, and then do that on the right hand side. And then I also want you to finish your raw edge. Go ahead and do that now for your lower ruffle. All right, so I went ahead and grabbed my lower ruffle. Remember, I told you guys I cut 2 pieces instead of 3. And if you cut 3 pieces, you can also do that. It's just that your seams are going to be around the bottom of your dress in thirds. That is okay if you choose to do that too, or if your fabric is 45 inches wide, it is what it is. But my fabric was 60 inches wide, so I can do this. While I was in the sewing machine, I also went ahead and did 2 rows of gathering stitches, just like we did for the portion of the skirt that was going to be attached to the bodice. So I want you to go ahead and do 2 rows of gathering stitches. And guys, I did my first row at 3/8 of an inch, and then my second row at 4/8 of an inch. So go ahead and do 2 rows of gathering stitches. Again, make sure that you leave your threads long and that you don't backstitch at the start and at the end. So go ahead and do that now. Making sure that your seams are not, your lower ruffle is not twisted because it's a large piece of fabric. So pin on one side, matching your seams, right? And then pin at the other end, matching your seams. And now I want you to pull on all those gathers. Pull on those gathers, same way we did for our skirt, and you want to match the length of the bottom of that front and back skirt. And again, you want to make sure that all your gathers are even. So go ahead and do that now. Once you have all your gathers ready, I want you to pin all the way to the bottom of the skirt. So go ahead and do that now for your lower ruffle. All right, so I went ahead and adjusted my gathers and pinned it to I pinned it to the skirt. So lower ruffle, gathered, pinned to my skirt, front and back. Now I want you to stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance. Don't forget the back stitch at the start all the way to the end. And we're getting a little closer, but go ahead and do that now. And this took me about 10 to 15 minutes to adjust the gathers, make sure that they were even on both sides. So just take your time with this, all right? So go ahead and do that now. So I went ahead and did my lower ruffle and I finished my edge. And then later on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my hem. And then I finished it also inside. Let me show you, I finished it, right? All right, so now we are gonna go to start finishing our dress. So I want you to grab your facings, and you have a facing for the front, and also you have some facings for the back, but we'll start with the one in the front, and then you also have 2 dots. I want you to go ahead and finish that lower edge. And then you have these 2 dots. Remember you had that dot in the pattern. So I want you to pin right there. I want you to pin right there. And you also have another dot on this side. I want you to pin right there. So go ahead and stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance. Don't forget the back stitch at the start and at the end. And then I'm going to show you how we're going to finish this inside. So go ahead and do that now for the front facing. All right, guys, so I went ahead and stitched my facing to the front, right? So now what I want to do is I want to make sure that I stitch my facing, my understitch, my facing. So what I'm going to do, I want to make sure that I grab my facing and my seam allowance and I stitch those towards the facing. And also you have to fold here at the corners, right where that dot is at. So I just went ahead and pressed it. And when you are understitching, you want to get as close as possible to the seam. So you definitely want to make sure you back stitch at the start and at the end. And again, your seam allowance, it's towards your facing. You really want to get as close as possible as you can to that seam that you just created when you attach the facing. And of course, don't forget the back stitch. Okay, so I went ahead and understitched. All right, so I did my understitching, right? So now the pattern is asking you to fold these two pieces, and that's right where that dot was at, right? Where we stopped and kept on going. And then to just fold this in. And of course, guess what? It wants you to stitch to all of this by hand. So they want you to slip stitch. Right? So essentially, they want you to slip stitch and stitch it to your seam allowance, right? And also make sure that you finish this side. You need to finish that. And I'm definitely going to be stitching that by hand. All these loose threads. I'm going to be finishing all of that by hand. Slip stitch all of this, finish it, and then same thing we're going to do with the back facings. All right, so we did that front facing. You have to do some slip stitch, and it's going to be the same way in the back. So again, you have your back facing right sides together, right? And I like to do this with my zipper. Just, I feel like it looks a little bit nicer. Just have to make sure that you pay attention where you're going, because you're going to be going over your zipper. So go slow. And again, you have that dot on this side. And really what the dot does, it just ends where you are going to be folding again. So I want you to start at this corner, 5/8 inch seam allowance. Don't forget the back stitch there. Keep going. Cross your zipper feet and then turn. And then end where the facing is ending. Once you do that, right, and you have attached your facing, I want you to understitch like I did on this side. You see, I want you to understitch, right? See this side? I want you to understitch, and you're not going to be able to go all the way to the end, but you're going to be able to get pretty close. Once you do that, I want you to fold on this side, press it, right? And you're going to go ahead and slip stitch yet again, right? So, and of course, give all of this a really good press, right? So give all of this a really good press. And I'm going to go and do this side now. All right, go ahead and do that now. So I went ahead and stitched it, guys. Remember that zipper that was a little too long? You can go ahead and cut all of that now at an angle, right? Because we're going to turn this. And of course, don't forget to trim your seam allowance. Try to do that without cutting my dress, right? Make sure, where am I cutting here? Yep, I cut that. Once you do that, I want you to also understitch. And again, understitch as far as possible. You're not going to be able to get all the way to that corner, but try to get as far as you can with your sewing machine. So go ahead and do that now. I want you to understitch your facing. All right, so I went ahead and understitched my facing. You see the understitching right there. And again, just like we did with the front, they want you to fold that corner and slip stitch, right? And do that for both sides. And where I have the sleeves, I'm just going to tuck them in and also slip stitch and just get rid of those loose threads, right? And this is how it looks from the other side, right? So once you do that, you do your slip stitching, you have your hem to do. So they want you to do a narrow hem. So again, turn and then turn this piece in and then go ahead and stitch. And now let's also talk about our sleeves. I want you to try your dress and remember that we did a casing. So we still have this casing. So try it on and see how you like it. But again, I have my trusty little bodkin, right? And you are, again, make sure that your elastic is not twisted. And you're just going to pull it through all the way around. I actually like the way my sleeves look without the gathers. I may put a little bit, but not a lot, because I am just not a lover of elastic by my arms. But if you like it, you can go ahead and do it. That's why I had you wait till the end, so you can try on your dress and you can kind of adjust as you see fit. So once you get your elastic through, make sure again that it's not twisted and that you try it on, right? Perhaps you want some gathers, but not a ton, like I do. And once you do that, go ahead and put your bodkin away. Go ahead and stitch your elastic, right? Stitch your elastic and go ahead and stitch that opening close, all right? All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that sew along. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that sew along. Stay tuned for pictures of the dress. And of course, if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them below. I will put pictures on the blog and a pattern review. Till next time.